I would genuinely say at this point, any one of them could replace me, and they're all different.
Hello and welcome to episode 5 of View from the Hill, the podcast where we chat to leaders in local government. Today, joining me is the Corporate Director of Children's Services at the London Borough of Hillingdon, Julie Kelly. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Cool. As always, we start off with our guest journeys. It's really interesting, I find, to know the journey to how you got to the role you're in at the minute. Were there any sort of early influences or, any particular reason that took you down to the route into local gov or social care or education, whatever the route was?
Okay.
How did it start?
I'm not sure I can take us back as far as it started. I'm trained social worker because there's many routes into being a DCS, not just social work bound, social work trained. And I trained in Glasgow. And at the time that I trained in Glasgow is when we were seeing some of the issues that we've seen in London recently around gang activity, knife crime, crime in general, young people ending up in prison. And initially trained in criminal justice because I was never going to work in children's services, because for me, I just thought that was just too hard. I didn't really want to do the child protection. I wanted to do this criminal stuff, the probation stuff, those assessments. And then it was a slippery slope. I started in criminal justice and quite quickly, within the first 2 years, I ended up in youth justice because I thought you need to really get in there earlier.
Yeah.
And that followed through until after 3 years qualifying, I ended up in a generic children and family service when they existed, because actually early intervention is the way to go. I'm not saying you can't influence change or affect change at any point,
Yeah.
but actually the earlier the better. So I was a children's social worker in Scotland for another few years, and then I moved to Birmingham in 2003. I've done that. Stupidity, madness. I'd been reading the community care about how awful it was and what was happening in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I thought, well, Glasgow's a big city with lots of challenges. Birmingham's is going to be different. It's more diverse, it's bigger. But actually, there was a bit of safety and context of another city. So I managed to persuade the family to come to Birmingham for 2 years. You might get me saying 2 years a lot. So that was the fun. We'll just go for a wee adventure to Birmingham for 2 years.
And that was for
Just
your sort of development, always career. Okay.
to get, to find out what that was about. I'd also read quite a lot about the English system was different from the Scottish system. And it was not long after the Climby inquiry came out as well. And when I read that, I couldn't quite understand how that could happen. When I landed, I saw quite quickly how that could happen, which was quite shocking, but actually motivating.
Yeah.
There was something to do there. And I spent in Birmingham probably another few years, and then took a team manager role, managed the citywide disabled children's services, which again was a different perspective. Moved to other West London, sorry, I'll have to edit that. It was West Midlands, not West London, West London now, to other West Midlands boroughs, and just progressed to, advanced practitioner, team manager. And then I went from a team manager there to Kafkas. You might see a link. It was a time around 2009 when Theresa May was in opposition and said she wanted to disband them. They had 10 failed Ofsteds, and I wanted to know what that was about, and maybe there was some challenge and something that we could do there, which, yeah, again, bravery or stupidity, I don't know, you can make up your own mind there, but I really enjoyed that time because it gave me a different perspective. It wasn't local government, but it's very much that arm's length.
Yeah. I'm quite
Triangle.
I'm
And
quite
curious how do you manage that, and still working with government departments. And while I was there, we moved from the DFE to the MOJ, which was interesting,
right.
and went on a huge transformation program, which was great. I loved it. Modernising the service, really putting children first, bringing two disparate private law and public law areas together. And I've done that for almost 8 years. I was going there for 2 as well. And done
We've seen.
done a few roles there, and I left there in 2017. I was head of practice for the West Midlands, so it covered 17 family court areas and had really changed the way that it operated. And then I came to Hillingdon, as head of child in needs of help and protection. and I wanted to felt I'd been out of local government too long, and thought, "Oh, well, a sideward step, and that'd be interesting." I didn't have Hillingdon in my sight, so I was still looking around the West Midlands, but somebody who managed me previously in Cafcass was working here at the time as a deputy director, and said, "Come on, you'll love it, it's great, I've got lots of work to do." And I said, "All right, but I'll come for 2 years." That sounds a long commitment to. And that was 7.5 years ago. I've had a couple of roles here, and I've been the DCS since 2022, so 2.5 years now in this role.
So how was the first step? Because we covered quite a lot
Yeah.
there. So the first step into, well, I'm quite curious about Cabcast, which I was going to say.
Yeah.
That step going working in local government for quite a while, and then stepping into, well, I don't even know how to describe it because I know what it is they do,
Yeah.
but I don't, from a local government perspective, I don't know how the culture would be different, and is there any light that you could shed on that?
It was very different, and I think it's probably very different now, and it was very different when I left. And I think it depends what angle you looked at it. It was almost a service of two hats. Where private law work, which is divorces, people trying to make arrangements for their children, they can't agree, maybe allegations around safeguard concerns, but there's no local authority social work involvement.
Yeah.
And then there is a public law side where the CAPCAS provide guardians to oversee and be the advocate for the child and ensure that the local authority are doing what they need to do in the best interest in the child. So there's that scrutiny role, but both had very different status in the world, and both were recruited from the you had the Guardian panel and the court welfare. So it was a bit of a mishmash. It wasn't gelled. And it was really interesting because my perception is the public law work was a hard work. And after being there for about 12 months, I thought, no, public law work is the easier work. Not easy, because nothing in this job is easy. But private law, you don't have the same frameworks, the same support. So if you imagine public law proceedings, you have local authority solicitors, you have legal aid for other solicitors, you have the whole child protection and PLO framework around it and support. In private law, you have the CAFCAS officer. You might have a solicitor, you might not. You might have the parent might represent themselves, then
Yeah.
and some of those things are more intractable. So we've done a lot of modernisation work there. And the perceptions from the outside to the inside, I imagine that everything, because it's very good leaflets and everything was very shiny, but also made me appreciate how well structured local authority work is. No. And I think we brought, a range of people brought that to the table. And then I think at some point Cafcass got better than local authority work. But in terms of the use of digital technology, remote working, all those things that people are doing now post COVID were happening about 10 years ago in that space as it moved forward. So it was a really good learning experience.
Oh, it's brilliant.
So a chance to work nationally as well.
Yeah.
Just a patch.
So then when going back into, like, do you feel like you were better equipped to deal with the role that you were going into because of that slightly different experience? Because
I
just before, to give you a bit of context, a theme that we've gotten from a few of these episodes now is the more variety you have in your experience before going into, like a, the top position in social care, the more prepared you are, the more things you've almost seen there, which you just wouldn't, by nature of the fact that you've not seen
yeah.
varied things, wouldn't happen. So did that kind of prepare you a bit
I
before
don't know that it
into it?
prepared me, but it definitely expanded my experience and my depth of understanding. The link with central government helped me understand the data link of local government, and having that national perspective, I think, rather than just your area, because each area is unique and we all have weird and wonderful ways of doing stuff. I'm here in Hillingdon, my neighbour in Harrow do something different. There are some similarities, but we all have a different way of doing it. But having that ability to see across and really lead an area that needed transformation, and there was a lot of scope to do that. I think it helps in terms of confidence. It helps in terms of really understanding the bigger picture and not being so narrow. But I was worried about coming back to local government. I thought, what if I've forgotten what to do? What if I can't hack this now? It's very different, you know. Oh, what's it going to be like? And I think after about 6 weeks, I felt I'd never left. And so was different. So
Amazing. So remind me of the role that you stepped back into when you came back to Italy.
It was head of children and native health and
Right.
protection.
I'd say from starting at that point to getting to the DCS role happened, well, from my experience, and this probably isn't the most, knowledgeable in the whole sector, but in my experience, that's a relatively like quick rise. How did that happen? And were there any particular reasons for it? Was it maybe that mentor that sort of brought you in that sort of gave you a lot of context around it? What influenced that?
I think there's a variety of factors, and it was a sideways move, right? Because I was head of planning of a huge area before I came in here, but part of that was, well, it was very deliberate because it's a different role and sort of things in my feet. There was a lot of activity to do very quickly. I came in July 17 and we had the first, our first ILACs and one of the first ILACs in the April 18. So there was a lot of activity around that. I think without sounding arrogant that how I led through that, I was lost at blinking. The work that we'd done in preparation gave not only my direct line manager, but the DCS at the time a bit of confidence in this unknown person that had just come down for the Midlands. And, as into ability to do that. But then there was just opportunities that came up following the Offsetting's eviction. The director at the time had the opportunity to take some risks and make some changes and space to sort of experiment and look at different models of delivery. Where they'd had that sort of affirmation that things were good, and that was absolutely great. So what could we do different to make it better? And there was AD roles created, service manager roles went because our team managers were far more confident that there was space then. And I find for one of the AD roles, there was two. And I took that and then to 2018, and that covered the front door right through to your safeguarding, but not like of children and court and that business. And I was quite enjoying that. But then my direct line manager got a DCS post in another of London Borough, and off she popped there. And I kept my post for a bit, but stepped up in an acting capacity sort of into us for about 6 months or so. We had the Ofsted focus visit during that time. And then that role became a permanent role up until the DCS. So people moved on, there were opportunities. Still had to interview, still had to get it out and had to do the members' interviews and the rest of it. So it was circumstance as well as what came up.
And then when you did take that step into the DCS job, which many people that will be listening to this might have in their ambitions at some stage in their career, I've heard from a few of these other conversations that you're never prepared for that job when you get into it. What kind of took you off guard initially, and maybe how did you maybe learn to overcome
I think
some
for
of
me,
these things?
because I took a role in an organisation I was comfortable with, it was more of a slow burn realization of what you're not ready for. Feels that it came bit by bit, but the advice I would give, and it's not advice that I took myself, but I've learnt from that, is where there are aspirant opportunities. My previous then it told me, oh, why don't you apply for staff college aspirant BCS? I thought, oh, no, I'm too busy. I can't be bothered. Or some loads of stuff. I'm being very honest. That was those reasons. And it wasn't like I thought I knew it all. I just thought, just don't get too much to be doing. But one of those, when you become a DCS, you're automatically enrolled in the new DCS program. And because I was automatically enrolled, I thought, all right, okay, I'll go and see what that's about. And it was excellent. And I thought, oh, I really missed out. I could have had a lot more of that input before. In that other space. It's different from the aspirant stuff because you're already in the job. But again, anybody stepping into the post, I would say, make the time to do it. I'm a convert from that. I'm too busy. There's too much things to do to take the time out, do the 3 residentials or whatever it is, meet colleagues across the country, again, getting that wider perspective and sharing challenges and solutions. I thought was absolutely amazing. So now 2 of my direct reports are on. So I am, poacher turned gamekeeper really. I'm like, no, you must go for it. It'll be really good. Because I think part of your job, and probably any job in local government, is how do we replace ourselves? Which is clearly what my director was trying to do, but I was having none of it because I was doing something else. But that would be whatever. biggest bits of advice, take that because there's so much experience in those rooms.
For context, for some of the listeners, before we sit down and record this, we sort of brief the guests on some things that they want to speak about. And something that came up in our chat before this was kind of the perception of children's services that you feel is had outside of people that work in it or interact with it. Before we kind of go into, what the views that you've got about it, what do you think the perception is often for people that might be, on the verge of maybe having to use social services, or even those that don't know anything about it? Like, what do you think people think, really?
I think in general, and what we know and hear from polls and various things, that there is a negative connotation, particularly you think about children's social work.
Yeah.
The wider social care side of it, not so much.
Right.
But that idea of social work, and there's perceptions and myths that either social workers don't do enough and they leave children to experience terrible things.
Yeah.
They do too much and they interfere in family life. They want to know your business. It's oppressive. If you need help, they're there to judge you. They will want to remove your children. And there's things in the media. We'll see things on TV programs, which I do think is really irresponsible. And that's the one thing that drives me absolutely mad. If you're making a TV program, do the research properly. So there's lots of myths out there. And because we don't talk about, unless something terrible happens, about individual children, it's really hard to get the positive
Yeah.
across, and it's particularly to the wider public. I think we do it internally really well. There's loads of good news stories, lots of families and young people that do really well because of the additional support that they've got. But the support, the children becoming looked after and being removed from their families, is about 2% of the children that we provide support for. That's not the core business. And there's lots of news about that because, you'll hear with the Stable Homes Built and Love review, you'll hear about the should be more family help, that the cost of bringing children into care. There's lots of that noise around. That's 2%. And then you look about 5%, we end up in some kinds of formal court proceeding. And it goes down the majority of children. Like today, I have 3,000 children in the social care side, the education side, clearly greater,
Yeah. Yeah.
that I'm responsible for, just over 3,000 children. And 300 of those are looked after children, not looked after this year. And 25% of that 300 are unaccompanied asylum seeking children to the Port Authority. Yeah. The rest of the work, 250 child protection cases. So take them out, you've got 2,500 children within the families that we're working with in the community to make sure that that's where our young people stay and thrive and are safe and well. We're moving further now, I think. We were in a space where it was family help and very family focused, and we learnt lessons because we missed safeguarding, as a profession. And then I think we probably overly proceduralised ourselves and focused
Right.
really on the child protection because we're really, and those big cases that happened were significant, are significant. They're the worst case scenario for anybody in this business. But I think over time we are hitting more of a balance.
Yeah. I think it's important to shed light on the overall picture, because I don't think anyone in the sector says that the worst cases don't deserve like the attention when they happen. But I only look, I always just look at it from my perspective, because that's all I've known. 2 years into this, I wouldn't have known about the majority of the work that happens in children's services had I not taken this job. I think it's probably important to shed a bit more light on that. Are there any sort of stories that stand out which might give it, present themselves as an example of like an average story? I think it would be quite powerful for people to know about it.
There are so many, but I think you're right. People aren't bothered about children's services, and they don't grab unless something goes wrong.
Yeah.
And even our residents who are great, they are very much concerned with the things that they see and feel in front of them, whether it's bins or roads or so. Unless things are going wrong, people aren't that bothered, so they don't hear a lot of it. But I've got an example, a fresh example just now. We have a young man now. He was involved in A range of things. He was badly exploited and let down and was used for criminal ends. We've worked with him for the last 2 or 3 years. Through that, he now has a job with the local authority. It's not nepotism, but we have to, ensure that our young people have a chance, of course. And he has just been shortlisted for the work that he does in supporting other children in terms of the biggest impact. We have, day after day, we have fantastic stories. We are piloting along with the rest of the London, the Your Choice programme for young people, um, using CBT techniques and working intensively 4 days a week. We're doing evaluations of that. We've just presented to the London Council's Leaders in Brief on yesterday what the team went to do about, because what we're seeing is an 80% reduction in harm for those young people. We're plotting over time that actually we are seeing that young people are may offend and that young people are getting into work, they're getting back into education, which is setting them up for life. There's fantastic stories that we have. We have, Paralympians who've worked with us. We have lawyers, we have doctors. In Hillingdon, it's quite interesting that we have a lot of our previous children come and give back, which is fantastic. And when we had our most recent Ofsted, probably about a year ago now, yeah, it was last October, and the inspectors wanted to speak to some young people, and they spoke to some of our older young people. And often we hear people say, "Oh, I want to make sure that things are better for the younger kids than they were for me because I'm not young now. We want to make things better." And there was some of that. But I think the really touching thing that had me and my team crying, and I don't cry very easily, was we had a young person and people agreeing that they are doing it because they're so thankful of the help and support and how well we looked after them. That's me. I get emotional about that, but nothing else. Yeah. So they're fantastic positive stories. Nobody could do this job for an extended period of time if it was grim and gloom.
Yeah.
That's the bit that gets you up out of bed in the morning.
And I think it's, yeah, you've hit the nail on the head there because there's more and more conversation. We've spoken about this with some of the other guests that there's the step up from the maybe the AD or the head of service position going up to the DCS job. There's less people than before. That's just something I've heard rather than experience because I've not been in it for long enough. But is that, do you agree that that's the case? And if so, like, what do you think could be
I
done
think
about here? And have you tried anything in your small part of the world?
we need to be intentional, and that's best to talk about replacing ourselves.
Yeah.
And what we need to map you is we need to be intentional about not just replacing with folk that are like us,
Right.
because that's the easy route. And if you don't have anybody in that group that isn't quite like you have to be really conscious and purposeful in spotting people's aspirations, talents, supporting them. And I try and be mindful of that when I'm looking and thinking about who next. I now only have 3 direct reports, just the way it works, portfolios. And I would genuinely say at this point, any one of them could replace me,
Yeah.
and they're all different. There is something for us around representation, around maybe not so much gender, because
Yeah.
that's moved on quite a lot. And usually we're probably meeting a lot of female DCSs now, where that maybe wasn't the picture previously.
Say, don't quote me on this, but I'd say more so. Actually.
Yeah, it's that really had that landscape really has changed. But in terms of Black, Asian, minority representation, we're not seeing it. I go to the ADCS conferences and NCAS, and you look round the room, and I'm not seeing the representation that I see in my frontline teams.
Right.
And we've got to ask ourselves deliberately why. If I've got 700 social workers or 700 send officers, I wish I had 700 send officers, but as I'm sure everybody does. But if we have that richness and diversity and experience and matching, well, why are so few getting
Yeah.
through it? Why is there so few don't make it or don't want to? And we've been doing quite bit of work on that. Some of the resources that are available, so it's not just about what we can do here. London's hugely diverse.
Yeah. Yeah.
When out of London Borough, tap into what other colleagues are doing to do that. The ballet course, I really promote that for our leaders. And people, when asked them, like, how'd you answer that? And some of the feedback that I've had, it is really frustrating. It's saddening, but we have to, it is about representation. No, not me. I can't do that job. I can't sit in front of the politicians, or I can't sit in front of the chief exec. There's issues around language, maybe English wasn't my first language. All those things people feel are barriers. So I think we have a responsibility
Yeah.
to remove those barriers, because otherwise there'll be no good left. Look at the social workers and the send officers and our teachers. Those are our future leaders. So we need to enable them all to the best
I
capability.
guess this is where like our worlds kind of combine a bit because when it comes to the recruitment processes, like a lot of that responsibility sits with us to try and make those processes as inclusive as possible
Yeah.
because there's a lot of barriers to that. I'd firstly highly encourage anyone who may be thinking about making that next step up and feeling like they might not be there for whatever reason it might be, and if you know the things that make you different are one of them, don't hesitate. And because we've been speaking a lot about how to make that process better, whether it's for disabilities more recently has been a topic that we've been addressing. Race has always been one, and there's a lot of different aspects that we can cover, and a lot of work to do, frankly speaking. But I think we've seen some things that work quite well. So recently we had an example of someone who was, what's the word for it? Is it neurodiverse? Yeah, I'm just trying to get my terminology right. And they had this, they had a particular requirement, and were it not for the due diligence that we did to find out that that's the case, they would have never spoken about it, as they'd not spoken about it before in any of their recruitment processes before. So I think the key point here is to have a culture where people feel comfortable firstly speaking about it before we just think that, oh, it will just happen over time, isn't it?
And I think it's easier, not easy, when you're thinking about internal
Okay.
promotion and internal talent. But so how do you, this is where it crosses over, I think, both worlds.
Yeah.
How do you attract the talent that you don't know about yet?
Yeah.
Out of the folk that are out there that, it can, I do think succession planning, internal recruitment, fantastic, but that's not the answer to everything. People are out there. How do we harness that? How do we enable it? I have discussions with our HR all the time around, well, how can we do recruitment differently? And there's a traditional view, there's how we move forward from that, from representation on panels to giving folk, we don't at this point in time, I'm advocating strongly for it, that we give people the questions, because we shouldn't really if you try to catch folk out. And I know there's co-pilot and AI, but when you're having, then your interview can be a dialogue.
Yeah.
Then you get more of a feel of the person. They get
That's what they're more like in
about the
interim. So in interim processes, it's more often a two-way conversation, and I think that's when people can show their personalities off a bit more, which is equally as important as their skill in what they do. But
well,
I've not been involved in
if
enough
if
permanent
I'm,
processes.
recruiting for,
Yeah.
for example, a lad, and they have to have this, that, and other. Well, the CD and the bits of paper they bring with will tell me if we've got this,
Yeah.
that, and other.
Yeah.
It's about the quality of thinking.
Yeah.
And the space that we're all in now, and I'd probably argue we've always been in, that maybe we're just starting to accept it, is continual change and transformation. We need, especially in more senior positions, we need thinkers, people, not folk that can just remember stuff and tell you the things that,
Yeah.
the buzzwords or whatever. We want people that actually are genuine, original thinking, able to apply, solutions to things.
I'd agree with
But,
your statement of
yeah.
giving the questions out actually, because
I'm
people can prepare for
a
that.
lot of people are like, "Oh, it's
Yeah.
cheating," and I'm like, "It's not really." It's,
Yeah, because I mean, after you finish exams at school and in university, if you go for it, retaining information isn't as important as being prepared for a situation that arises. Now, let's say maybe it's a good idea to let them know the question maybe a day or two before even. So there's a limit, but you still have time to formulate a pitch almost, right? Which is more important than just being able to know something like that.
even if it is, we're going to ask, and most people know that, but just confirm we're going to ask you about safeguarding or your
Yeah.
history or whatever to help that preparation. For me, I want to see the best of whoever's across the table.
Yeah.
I don't want to try and catch them out.
Yeah.
It's not to be with eliminate. No, I suppose it depends which lens you come from. You're trying to get the best folk, and it is competitive. There's a lot of it.
I think it tests
So
something
get more.
different though. When you interview someone on the day, you're testing how good are they at just being able to say it off the cuff, and that's a different skill to. That's not necessarily a representation for how well they do in a role. So I think we're in complete agreement with that. And maybe that's a step forward, something to think about off the back of this conversation to implement some type of change if anyone else agrees. To finish, I wanted to go a bit further on the succession planning that we spoke about earlier. So the way I'm seeing it is when you came into Hillingdon, there was someone who had that kind of approach in mind, understood the importance of it,
Yeah.
and you almost you slightly, I'd say, benefited from that foresight. You've gone on to mention earlier that you've had that same kind of mindset. My question is, what sort of advice would you give to people that are in a similar position to you at the minute to get that right? Because I think that's so important going forward, given the sort of landscape of local gov at the minute. I think it's really, really important.
I think there's immediate team point, isn't there? So, we all have direct reports that are usually ADs and old money, different titles in the new world, but they have specific areas of expertise, whether it's social care, safeguard, and early help, educations, however we cut it in local authorities. There is the getting to know your team
Right.
as well. Before that, it's the recruiting them,
Yeah, yeah.
and succession planning doesn't always have to be internal. So ensuring that we're open to external applicants. But once you've got your team, really getting to know them, get to know their aspirations, don't assume. And I found what's been really helpful is my approach to others and the approach to me. A lot of folk are going, oh, no, no, it's not for me. No, no, I really wouldn't want to do your job. Or no, no, I'm okay how I am. That's the initial response. It's don't just take that at face value.
Yeah.
Explore, ask why. And then we find some people might just actually really don't want to do this job. And I think that's absolutely okay too, because those technical experts and directors and other spaces are needed. But when they do and you identify what the barriers is, what the support is to really wrap around that. But it has to go beyond that. So you have to really think about your layers and spans and how you're identifying and enabling some challenge built in. Because I'll also ask my direct reports, right, okay, so who in your team? Who's the next you? Or who's the two next yous? Who's interested? So getting that culture developed throughout. And if they say, oh, well, not so and so, challenge it, because it might not be so and so, but actually that might also be other people's views or prejudices or just thoughts, on, oh, they can't do it or they don't want to do it. So having that challenging role to ensure that we're looking at all opportunities, and that's right down to the front door. I think you need to have that line of sight. So it starts top down, but also starts bottom up. What we do when we grow on our own. Where are the opportunities for young people to come into local government, not just children's services? Yeah. Nobody ever came to my school and spoke about local government.
I said the same thing in Anna's episode actually.
Nobody, and whether it's, we're talking specifically about children's services, so education, social care, early health, but local government, yeah, I'm sure we're on about 600 plus businesses out of this building we're sitting in now. So how do we attract, the folk that are going to be doing this job or whatever this job looks like in 40 years' time?
Yeah.
How do they know about it?
Yeah. I mean,
How do they get
I went to two unis and a school before that. I was so oblivious. The only thing I knew about councils was that they charge tax. Outside of that, I had no idea what
councils?
career in it could look like or anything like that. So, and I'm sure, but there are some programs in place where people are trying to, get the next generation of local gov, the workforce in local gov on board. But I definitely think there's a lot of work to do
You
there.
do yourself a disservice.
Yes.
Yeah. Because I think, the perception, I might be wrong, I know now I was thinking the perception was a council, which is dull, wasn't it? People that worked in the council. It took me years to even say that to people. When you say, what do you do? I thought, I don't want to say I'm a social worker because they're just going to tell me how terrible being a social worker is. And then you think, well, what am I going to say? Oh, I worked for the council. God, no, I'm gonna sound really boring. I work in local government. Oh, that sounds pretentious. Do you know
Yep.
what do you do? Well, we don't have a good.
I find the same thing when explaining to people the sector I recruit to, because I've got to speak about, okay, wait, what do you mean? Who do you place? Well, then I tried to go down the same kind of rabbit hole that you just mentioned. So social worker, local government. I mean, I say those words, but I don't want other people who don't know about it to get the wrong perception.
So it's both ends, and that's where sort of apprentices,
Yeah.
based on new talent. How do I know who are the really good social workers and the really good send officers and the folk that are fantastic if I'm not asking the questions, saying it? So it's being curious and also just writing it in to expectations. I do. I'm not doing my job if there's nobody here to replace me.
Yeah.
If I go off and nobody, this place stops running in children's and I've failed, it's not that I've been great and wonderful and held it together. That's a failure. And I think people need to understand their roles, particularly in management and leadership roles at every level. That if you haven't attacked that, then actually you're not fulfilling your whole role.
Yeah.
Really.
Thank you very much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Thank you.